So, welcome. The people will probably come along as we go. We're expecting, in fact, we had 111 registrations for these sessions. So while we're not expecting 111, we're expecting a reasonable size crowd. So this is the last of the sessions for tutoring at UQ, not tutoring at QQ, Ready to Tutor Week, where we put together a kind of collated a different set of sessions that will help you begin tutoring if you're a first-time tutor, and hopefully if you're not a first-time tutor, but hopefully you can add to your repertoire today in talking to our experienced tutors. We've got a group of people that are with us. I'd also like to make an acknowledgement of country. So the university, as always, acknowledges the traditional owners and the custodianships of the land on which UQ operates. We pay our respects to their ancestors and their descendants and continue to have cultural and connections to country. And I'd really actually always like to recognise that the learning that has taken place on the lands that we are meeting today. One of my colleagues had found this a few months ago now, but particularly if you're working online, sometimes it's nice to set up some kind of Zoom or Teams expectations around how you're going to operate on the day. So, for example, and you can set this slide up any way you like, and we'll share these slides with you later, but it might be that you might have a preference for cameras on and off. I prefer my cameras on because it's really nice to see faces, but I also have operated with them off completely, and I think we kind of got used to that. But if you would like your students to be with their cameras on, then maybe set out that expectation really well, really early as well. So muted, obviously, you can set up the expectation about putting hands up. You can talk about contributing to chat, which I think is an equally valid way of communicating, and some students obviously prefer it, and any other kind of things that you might like to think about that relates to the session that you're going to do. Okay, today we're very lucky. So I've got a couple of colleagues from Italy with me. I've got Helen from eLearning. You want to wave, Helen? I've got Peter Rutherford, a learning designer colleague. And I've got, I'll let them introduce themselves to when they get to speak. But we've also got Francis, who'll give us a wave, Lauren.
Hello. Hi.
And Graham,
G'day.
who have very happily come to talk to us today. So we welcome them. Okay, so what's kind of happened where this session was designed to kind of perhaps bring some of the learning together that you've been kind of engaging with over the last 3 days. And if you've also, hands up those people in the room who've also been part of tutoring at UQ, or have taken part in tutoring at UQ through their faculties in the last, I don't know, 2 weeks. Okay, I can see lots of hands going up. Yep. Okay, so unlike those things, those are for new tutors, and I'm hoping that they were very valuable for you. Today, what I want to do is just kind of revisit the design principles about good tutoring, why we need good tutoring, and considering how you might reflect on how you might set yourself up for success this next semester, and your students set up your students for success as well. Okay, so as you know, there's a Padlet in the chat. If you've just arrived, if you would like to add any, if you go to the Padlet, it'll have the instructions on it as to how to engage. But so your name, your school, if you want to put an image in there, any questions you'd like answered, and anything that you're worried about. And Helen has been posting that there's either a QR code or a link in the chat. Okay, so Peter, would you like to take us through why why the tutorial is important and why it has become, I think, even more important in the most recent times.
Good, thanks, Karen. Hello, everybody. My name's Peter Rutherford. I'm a learning designer with Italy. Part of my role is to help academics develop their learning and teaching quality at the university. I've had a few goes at presenting the tutors at UQ presentation, so I've got a little bit of experience in this area, and hopefully if you have any questions, I'll be able to support the others in answering those questions. I don't think we should underestimate just how important tutorials are, particularly where you've got larger classes, and I know that we have in some classes up around 1100 at UQ, which is reasonably extreme, but I think the benefit of the tutorial is that close contact that the tutor has with the student. Now, we know that a good relationship between the teacher and the student, or the tutor and the student, is indicative of students having a good, a higher perception of the quality of their learning experience. So as a tutor, it's going to be a valuable thing if right from the word go, you can start to develop a good rapport with your students, so that your students feel comfortable in the environment and they could be confident in approaching you to assist them with their learning. Now, the tutor's role is very important in this teaching cycle. You're taking those learning outcomes that the course coordinator develops for the course and developing learning activities that can help the students achieve the knowledge and experience and the skills that they need to be able to address the assessment. And that's the really critical part of it, because whilst the course coordinator sees the big picture, you can get down to the nitty-gritty of it. So generally, we recommend that a tutorial is best done with as much student engagement as possible. Nobody wants to go to a tutorial where you're just going through a mini lecture, repeating what's been said in class in the lecture, or just going through exercises, completing an exercise and marking it. What we really want to encourage is more student engagement, so the student feels involved, they're practicing their skills, they're learning new information by doing, and they're receiving feedback from their tutor to help improve their learning. So we would generally recommend that you have a range of different activities or different learning approaches so that you can cater for all students. What you really want to do is provide those learning activities for your students. You want to be able to assess their learning as they proceed, and I'm not just talking about summative assessment tasks, but conducting them formative things and giving them feedback on what they're learning in class during your tutorial time, and helping the students develop the skills and knowledge that they need to be able to reach that and complete the assessment task successfully. One of the big important things that comes under the role of the tutor is inclusion, and we'd like to think that all of our tutors make all of our students feel welcome and included in the group, and that they feel supported and valued. The other thing that you can address, because you're so close to the coalface, is academic integrity. Now, we know that's always been an issue in universities and in any forms of higher education, but being tutors and knowing the discipline and working so closely with your students, we'd like to think that you're able to direct your students wisely, that you demonstrate good integrity, and you provide information to your students and give them good reasons why they should engage in their studies wholeheartedly without engaging in any breaches of academic integrity. So I think that's for me, it comes back to that bit about the inclusion, making sure that your students feel valued and that they have a place in your tutorial where they can learn and practice and receive good feedback from you. Thank you, Karen. That's why I think it's important, but I think we're going to hear from Francis or Lauren or Graham now, are we, Karen?
Okay, we are. So when I spoke to Francis, Lauren, and Graham about I've asked them to give a personal kind of context about what works for them in their particular context. And I will talk a little bit more about that context a little bit later. So over to you, Francis, about what works for you. So if you can introduce yourself and maybe give us the context you were working in, and then go to.
Okay, so I'm not really going to approach this from a pedagogical standpoint. And part of the reason is that for a good part of my adult life, I set up a tour company in Berlin back in the mid-1990s, and it grew to a Europe-wide business. So I got used to talking with large groups of people, different levels of clients, whether they were government or military groups or Hollywood A-listers, or just quite simply budget travelers. So I kind of had a bit of a gift of the gab, perhaps, and learned over time to take complex information and to simplify it. So having said that, I see the slide that I've produced here maybe is not what you would do if you were making a slide, because I've got a lot of information there. And the thing is, we don't want people to necessarily be reading small print. So larger print, 18 points would be a minimum, I'd suggest. And then talking through that, not off the slide, of course, but conversationally is what I find best. So now, having said that, let me start with point number one. And when I'm beginning, remember, I should also, just say that I'm part of the business school. So whilst we have, of course, theory and we apply that to concepts, there's certainly a very significant real world element to business and entrepreneurialism and innovation and real world contexts there. So given that's the case, networks are very important. And I always encourage students from the get-go, if they do not have a LinkedIn account, that they should set one up. And then it's part of a social network, if you like, that they might use in future to reach out with their fellow students, or again with me. And a lot of these students on master's level are soon going to go on to become industry professionals. So I find that is really well worthwhile. And it might seem run-of-the-mill to suggest, but I think that works well. Secondly, as I realize there might be a time constraint and we want people to be able to ask questions at the end of this, University of Queensland has a very significant international cohort. Again, especially in business, I see sometimes these classes are 80% international students. So clarity, spoken word, using English that is free from too much colloquialisms to a degree, I think is important. And then at the end of the day, you've got to enjoy what you do. So you've got to speak from a position where you reflect your enjoyment for the subject, for what you're talking about. And if you don't come from that position, then you're not really going to be able to engage the students at a level that you would like them to, perhaps, because the best tutorials or workshops or whatever you want to call them are where there's a sense of excitement and the time goes before you know it, because people are engaged and, you know, quite enthusiastic. So moving on, first impressions and credibility. I always introduce myself, give a little bit of a background history. This semester, for the first time, I used with my fellow colleagues a different approach. And that approach was inspired by an article I'll put in the chat soon. And it was about interviewing the professor, is the name of the article. And the title goes on to say, an alternative to the drudgery of the first class. Now, we were inspired by this article, which kind of flipped the delivery of the first class, whereby we had students ask us questions so they could interview us instead of, you know, just a one-way discourse. So that is one way to build up credibility, a bit of a conversational approach. But again, be mindful that throughout the duration of the entire semester, you need to keep up this credibility through how you're engaging the class. The next point I have, again, quickly, and being mindful of the clock, is I have found over the years, and especially during the pandemic, that you talk with a lot of international students on Zoom and you try to engage them. Many might be Chinese students, for example, and you've got to give space for them to, if English is not so strong on their part, you've got to give them time to be able to digest the information. So I used to initially think, oh, they've not responded, but then maybe 10 or 15 seconds later, with space in silence, I would slowly get response back. So give space, allow there to be some breathing room for people to respond. Of course, be mindful, once again, English is going to be of varying different levels amongst the student body. Now, the last couple of points, just quickly, avoiding monotony, tedium, mix it up where needed. So yes, feel free to break from the script that maybe you've set out for yourself. If something's working, there's no need to interrupt it. So keep agile is the point there. And then my last point is that I have somewhat of a different attitude towards education. I view it, I think, correctly in the context of what it is today. In a certain way, it's an academic institution, yes. On the other side, it is a business and we're rendering educational services. So I'm saying this because the relationship that I have or try to have with the students is that we're peers. They're adults. This is an adult educational setting. So there's no hierarchical ideas on my part. I engage with students as peers, as equals. And I think that's also very important. So there you have it.
Thank you, Francis. And I think your last point is excellent, and I agree. And in fact, there are a number of different ways to think about higher education in terms of andragogy instead of pedagogy. And andragogy is the study of adult education. So we'll go down that pathway. So thank you. That was a lovely summary. Moving right along, can I get to you, Lauren? Welcome, Lauren.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Karen, for inviting me to be part of this workshop today. So I'm going to be speaking from the perspective of a science tutor because I'm a scientist. And so our tutorials are not necessarily in classrooms, but we're predominantly in practical labs because the kind of work that we do is applied in a practical setting. So that is going to be the perspective I'm going to speak from today. Just a little bit of context about myself. So I did an undergraduate science degree here at UQ. Then I started my honours degree, and that's when I began tutoring. So I pretty much went from being the student the following 1 year to overnight the following year being the tutor, which can be quite intimidating because these people were my peers, or, you know, they're only a year or so younger than me at the time. And that was an experience I had as being an educator where I wasn't too far removed from the student experience, which has its benefits, but also can be a little bit intimidating because I wasn't really sure what to do either. So from a science perspective, it's really important that not only are we giving them good learning opportunities in the practicals, but safety is paramount. And so we don't only have responsibilities for their learning, but for their physical and psychological safety and the safety of everyone that we're responsible for in the group. So building this sense of trust and respect with your students is paramount. They need to feel like they can approach you and ask the stupid question if they're unsure what the next step is, or you know, if you have to repeat yourself 6-7 times, that's totally fine. I'd rather repeat myself 7 times than have a really unsafe thing happen on my watch. But you know, accidents do happen, and at the same time, you've got to be adaptable with that. It's usually never anything catastrophic, and you know, you need to be vigilant and make sure that you know, safety is being upheld at all times. But it's important to never make the student feel silly, I guess, for making the mistake. I've tutored for 5 years now, and they still surprise me. I think I've got, you know, the laundry list of things that can go wrong in a protocol, and I always find something new every year. So having said that, the experienced tutors have a laundry list, but they'll still surprise you with something, and that's okay. I think having a positive attitude and being non-judgmental and just correcting the students, showing them a different technique, or maybe asking them to demonstrate the technique to you again so that you can correct that, so that we can resolve the error and move on with the protocol, is really important. In higher level science courses, I would say, you know, the way we teach science is quite stepwise. And so there may be instances where there's a level of assumed knowledge. I would say be careful of that. The students have been on break most of the time. They don't remember some of the stuff they're supposed to have learned or remember. So I like to give recaps, set a routine in my practical, talk about what we're going to do today, why we're going to do this, what's the fundamental science behind it, and have a discussion where we're all on the same page first before we even touch any kind of scientific equipment, so that everyone's aware of what the process is. And, you know, I'm never afraid to repeat the basics. It's actually a very good learning opportunity for me as a teacher to be able to explain, you know, scientific context that becomes somewhat assumed as you progress through science again, in a way that allows them to interconnect their knowledge, so that we're not just learning in silos of courses, but we're learning across courses and across year levels as well. So one of the ways I like to do that is to ask prompting questions. Things are going wrong. I ask the students, why do you think that might be going wrong? Let's look back at the protocol. Where do you think we may have missed a step? Or what do we know about the science that maybe could be something that we've done here that has changed this outcome? And a failed outcome is not a bad outcome. It's just another learning experience. So that's, I think, an important mindset. And I'm cognizant of time, but I just wanted to speak a little bit from the tutor perspective as well, because now 5 years on, I'm a head demonstrator. So my role is a little bit different now to what it was when I was first tutoring. And I was a really nervous first tutor. I was really worried about making mistakes. I didn't want to let my students down. I felt like I didn't know the knowledge. And, you know, I'd go to my head demonstrator at the end of every session and be like, you know, this went wrong, or like, I didn't think I did this very well. You know, do you have any advice for me, or how can you help me do this better the next time? And now 5 years on, I am that person for a group of 14 tutors, you know, this semester in the same room. So the way we teach science is you're never alone. There is a team of people. You are responsible for a group of students, but there'll be other tutors there. And there'll be someone who's designated a head demonstrator role, like me, who's responsible for making sure that you feel comfortable and you know your job. And if you have any problems, you can speak to that person. So be confident in yourself, be confident in your abilities. You can do this job and you know the knowledge, and you'll surprise yourself with how much you do remember, because it can be stressful too. In science labs, you can't just get out your laptop and Google it. You need to kind of recall it. But if you don't know it, that's a good opportunity to show your students how to find out. as well, because they need to be self-directed learners, and you can't just give them the answer all the time. And so even showing them how to find an answer is an important learning process, even if you can't recall something off the top of your head. And you're in charge, you know. It's important that you establish a routine and some boundaries so that if there is a safety issue, you can deal with that quickly and get everybody's attention without coming across as unapproachable or, you know, mean, or, you know, you can still be fun, you can still have respect and trust, but just make sure that you do have this expectation of them and their behavior in this environment, because it is a safety requirement. And also because we are a team, you know, build relationships with the people on your team. We're all there to support one another. There are people in roles that are support roles for you as a new tutor, which is, I assume, the audience we're kind of speaking to today. And over time, you'll build your confidence as a tutor, you'll build your experience, you'll build your understanding. And if you're coming across something that you're unsure of, an experienced demonstrator has probably seen it 20 times. So we're there to help you. Teamwork is key. There's no point suffering in silence if it's a quick fix that somebody who's got a bit more experience can show you, and we can move on and everything's fine. So that's kind of my advice from a science perspective. I wish you all the best for your tutoring this semester. Teamwork makes the dream work. And yeah, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those at the end. Sorry, Karen, if I went for too long.
No, perfect, Lauren. And I love the idea of that sense of honesty around if you don't know something, that to be kind of completely honest about it and to say, look, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure there's a way we can find this out, either together or you can go and look at it there somewhere else. So thank you very much. And we go on to Graham Lee. Welcome.
Thank you. Okay, I'll try and make this as painless as possible. So I'm a lead tutor in HABS for Health 1000, and I'm also a course coordinator with sport and physical activity in the School of Human Movements. So I want to cover a couple of practices that I found important when teaching, whether it's online, hybrid, or in face-to-face classes. A lot of these are, if you can think about them as being on steroids when you're in that online environment, because they are especially important in my experience. I'm a sociologist, so harnessing the human interactions for learning is really my focus area. In my first year of teaching, my focus was just delivering course content, and the feedback really was brutal from the students. I got comments like, Graham can't engage an audience because he's already put them to sleep, or I feel that I never really learnt anything from you, which is a real kick up the proverbial, and I obviously had to improve the way I did things. It taught me that I always needed to consider the student who was listening to me. And learning from great teachers, I needed to treat every class as a performance in a way. I needed to use my eyes, I needed to use my body to actually transmit enthusiasm and energy into the students, no matter how I felt. If I was having a really crappy day, it doesn't matter. When I'm in the class, I push forward with enthusiasm. Doing this helps the students to get that I actually enjoy teaching, and that their learning matters to me, and it helps them to connect with the course material through me, as Peter mentioned earlier. One of the early things I noticed, there was a couple of people mentioned the early classes. And Peter mentioned that reminders and support of academic integrity are important roles for us. And at first I thought, just referring students to the ECPs or Blackboard to address things like assessment dates was all it was really, was all was needed. It was the most time-effective way of setting ground rules. And it didn't take me long to actually learn that this approach meant that I had to spend a lot of time answering emails, and individually explaining to people in consultations, especially students with English as a second language, about my expectations. So I also learnt that not all courses expose students equally to things like academic integrity. I've had third-year students that have never written a report at a university level before. I've had international students who have never learnt that referencing is important, or why plagiarism is important. Therefore, I spent about 10 minutes in the first class outlining what I expect from students. During this time, I explain assessment dates, marking criteria, academic expectations such as referencing, citing, email protocols, in-class participation, behaviour, assignment coaching, and feedback methods. I also asked the students, by running an activity, if they want to add any extra things to what I've actually put forward to them. To help students manage stress, about 2 weeks before each assessment, I also invest 10 minutes in explaining the assessment and the ideas or the areas that are important, using the marking criteria and highlighting what to do if students want a 7, for example, or what to do if they just want a 5. So I'm clearly expressing or acknowledging that not everybody wants a 7, and I'm also acknowledging that not everyone is going to have a 7. By over-communicating these instructions, I get far fewer emails, I get better quality submissions, and I get much more appreciative student feedback. The next couple of items I'll deal with together. So whether related to technology, illness, room, course material, things will go wrong for you or for all of us at some stage. Therefore, preparation is important, especially for the unexpected, like a room tech failure. How well we prepare for the unexpected can affect the student experience, and our preparation supply the conditions for their learning. So students need reminding that they have their part in co-creating the learning environment, and an unpleasant experience can be due to factors beyond the tutor's control. However, I find that creating a lesson plan for each class helps me to organise thoughts and to manage for the unexpected. My plans include tutorial structure, agenda, the materials and techniques I need, the learning outcomes, and descriptions of each class activity and its timing. And last but not least is what the sort of things I need to do post-class. They also allow me time for running activities like checking in with the students, building trust, and fostering team dynamics. Planning alternative activities is a terrific way of managing the unexpected. So having shorter or longer activities that you can basically replace depending on how the tutorial is going is a great way of maintaining your time. When things go wrong, being able to draw on these is a great way of not only showing that you're organised, but it's also a great way of gaining student empathy, and that goes a long way when things don't work. Over time, I've found that group activities, especially those that involve mixed professions in the classroom, can aid with belongingness by learning through social professional comparison and defining students' sense of themselves and their social identity. They're also, it's really important for first year students, because some of the students are really struggling with their identity coming out of school and going into the university and the adult environment. Using group work actually offers opportunities for them to develop these soft skills that they need going forward, and the emotional intelligence that they need to actually hear things from other perspectives, to improve their vocabulary, which is really important for people with English as a second language. The students also learn to manage their personality or other people's personalities, to negotiate and to identify and leverage talent within their group to produce better products that aren't possible individually. However, I learnt the hard way that allowing activity, to allow activity time to debrief and to get student feedback on the activities and the way they worked as teams, because these are important mechanisms to help tutor and student connection and student-student connection. My second last item is to have fun with critical thinking. So making our activities fun can help with engagement. I do things like leveraging the spirit of competition or using realistic scenarios to make learning fun. Using tools like Padlet, UQ Word Cloud, UQ Poll, all of those sorts of things are really handy. Getting students to actually create posters, PowerPoints, interpretive dances, raps, speeches, and present those back to the class as part of the way that they're presenting their activity outcomes are all really good ways of getting the students to buy in and to produce things that they enjoy. As far as feedback goes, I've found that the active learning tools that I've just mentioned are really good for doing things like checking activities and monitoring stress levels throughout the semester. I've learnt to monitor these changes and tailoring my activities and learning methods as students change over the semester. Things like injecting a bit more fun into tutorials when their stress levels are high around assignments and those sorts of things. Finally, in-class feedback helps me to watch and learn from the students. I learn to gauge an individual or a class's stress by analysing their responses to activities or watching what they are doing while I'm walking around the room teaching. When I catch students working on assignments in class, they may be under stress from other classes, or they may not be engaged in my class. I try and tailor my style and my content and reactions based on this knowledge. Often students have taught me the perspectives that I had not thought of are important when completing some of these group activities. And for me, this is gold. I always plan times for these activity debriefs and acknowledging the responses, especially if it's left of field thinking. So to summarise, I see being a great teacher as many little things supporting each other to create a positive learning environment. Thank you for listening, and I hope that was really helpful, and I'm happy to answer any questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. I think that's an excellent point around that kind of feedback idea and that closing the feedback loop. And I like the way that you talked about not just the preparation beforehand, which obviously is important, but that post-reflective activity where you kind of look at where you need to go based upon what you picked up from your students. And I think that is gold, that kind of process. So we've heard from all our three guests today. So we've got a bunch of burning questions, and I think, Peter, have you going to, you can either post a question in chat. We've got a questions at all. Oh, there you go. Shannon says, not sleepy at all after all that. So if you've got any burning questions, can you post them in chat? And or Peter, have you got control of the Padlet there?
Yes, I do have control.
Do you want me to send? You run this. Do you want me to share it, or would you like to?
Oh no, I've got my own copy here.
Okay. I'll share it up on the screen then.
Oh, okay. Why don't you do that?
You've got your own version, and I'll just put mine up too as well. How's that?
One of the questions that appeared early on was to do with working with students who are English second language and how to deal with them. And we did hear a little bit from Francis earlier on. He had some good suggestions about allowing time to receive responses, but I'm just wondering if any of our other tutors might like to suggest techniques that they do. Perhaps Graham or Lauren.
Thank you. Yeah, I think Francis's point about allowing students with English as a second language time to actually cognate what's been asked is really, really important, and I do use that. But also, while students are doing activities, I walk around and just check in with each group or each student and try and assess how they're going by asking them questions and seeing whether they're actually engaging with the activities, and then going from there as far as what extra things do I need to scaffold as far as supporting particular individuals because of their, the constraints they might have due to English.
From my perspective, one of the things I do in a science lab, we don't have access to any laptops or computers or phones. You can't use anything. So I have a notebook. I write all my notes in it. I take that with me. They all have prac manuals. And then I have a whiteboard. My whiteboard is every time I start the class, it's prepared. And it has diagrams on it. It has steps on it. It has labeled tasks and the order we're going to do it in. It has my name. It has students' names on it because that's how I learn their names. But I think a lot of things I have is, a lot of the teaching I do is verbal, but then I think that the aid of the diagrams really helps because they have the notes written in their prac manual that tells them what we're going to do. Then I verbally explain what we're going to do as well in a slightly different way. And we have diagrammatic visuals as well, which they find easier to follow along with sometimes than the really wordy text of the prac manual. So I think it's just presenting the information in a few different ways as well, so that they can make connections between the text and visual elements, if that is more helpful in their understanding. If the English, particularly in science, a lot of the, you learn more words in first year biology at university than you do in a first year language class at university. So even though we're speaking English, science is its own language as well. So there is that kind of barrier to where we're learning a suite of language together that is English, but isn't, the English we'd all learn at home. So there's that too.
Great, thanks, Laura. And just going on from that, there's another question in the chat about mixing national and international students together, and it follows on from who was it? Shannon's question originally about English speaking backgrounds. Mixing international students with domestic ones. Absolutely. I mean, they're here to learn from one another, so that would be encouraged. One thing I've been read in the past and is recommended is that when you do have international students, it's not a bad idea if you're doing group work to have at least another person in that group with them of the same ilk, so that they've got somebody that they can feed off one another. And if they're in a discussion, they can practice their ideas with the other person before presenting it to the larger group. So, and that's going to help them by being more engaged and also developing their language skills, of course, as well. Would anybody else like to comment on that? I wonder if we've got any past international students who are now going to be tutoring that would like to comment.
Feel free to unmute if you would like to comment. The other point earlier about giving, I think, was it Francis, you made the point about giving people time to consider how long or how often to answer. So can you talk a bit? I call it wait time.
Yeah, well, listen, maybe that is a product of teaching online over the past few years. during the pandemic. And that whole platform of Zooming, people can be a bit reticent, turn off their cameras and God knows what they do, eat dinner or, who knows. But I think in terms of mixing the groups and giving groups a choice of who they would like to work with, I'm not sure. It depends who your cohort is. You want people to get out of their clique and go and meet new people, because that reflects the real world, and mixing with different people, different backgrounds, different cultures. And certainly, I think that's education in itself. And, we want people to be friendly to each other. So people come from all walks of life. And I do find that, or I have seen that, you do get Australians perhaps grouping together, and then all of the international students are kind of over there. And I mean, I don't like that, because I like to see people welcoming, and everybody walks away learning from each other as well.
And Patrice has suggested that, maybe you might introduce a buddy system between your nationals and internationals and your domestics. Have you had experience with that, Patrice? No, sorry, you're asking the question. Have you had experience with that, Francis?
Again, I'm not necessarily one overly mindful with techniques of learning. I kind of approach it pragmatically. If I see somebody that looks like they do need some support, or maybe they've got inhibitions, I just, I do try to make them comfortable. And in terms of a buddy system, I mean, I wouldn't conceptualize that in my mind, but at the end of the day, I guess you've got to read who you're working with and just try and help everybody along. But I haven't per se come up with a buddy system so far. And they are adults, is my point, reverting back to that. They've got a certain level of independence, so it's up to them as well.
Good point.
I just want to say, I think it's important we don't try and separate the students into groups of, these are the domestic students and these are the international students, and the international students might have additional struggles. I think, I wouldn't have a clue whether my students were domestic or international. I don't know. And it doesn't interest me how they're enrolled in my course. I have a group of students that I'm responsible for, and regardless of how they are enrolled, it's my responsibility to make sure they feel heard, they feel welcome, and that I'm providing them with the educational opportunities they need in my practical. And that kind of becomes apparent to me as I'm engaging with the students. And I think it's important to meet every student where they are at, regardless of whether domestic, international, when the English second language is presenting as an issue or not, because that there's plenty of domestic students whose English who's their first language, who's still really struggling with the content and require a lot of support. So I don't think necessarily we should focus on, I don't think English second language presents itself maybe as much of a problem as maybe we're speaking about in this discussion, at least not in my experience. That's not something I'm very mindful of, but may emerge with one or two students over my hundreds of students I've taught, where I'm like, maybe this a bit, speaking a bit slower is one of the things I have to do a lot. And also just repeating myself in multiple ways and using different language to describe the same thing, just in case there's another word that can help with the meaning. It's about communicating meaning, I think, rather than the language specifically.
So I'll just jump in there. I think that's really good, Lauren. And I do, or I have found, I've got colleagues that do treat the international cohort in some ways with the presumption that, oh, they're going to be a bit shy, they're not going to get stuck into it. So I really like what you said there about treating everybody the same. I think that's great. So that's what I would say, with the one exception that sometimes, I guess, nudging a bit of a mixture where it's quite evident that, yes, of course, there's the international students. Yes, of course, there's the domestic students over there, because they tend to get a bit shy. And yeah, so I like what you say. And I do not have that presumption. I don't like to see that. And I do hear it, if we're being honest, here in this presentation. There are presumptions made, but I think they should be kept at bay. I like what you said.
Is there other questions maybe that have arisen? I think there was one earlier about mature age students on the Padlet that I saw. Yeah.
I think, because particularly, so the one about dealing or working with people who are in a master's program. Was that the question, Lauren? And how
yes, I think
more
so.
mature students, I guess. How do you kind of manage that?
From my perspective, that can be was originally quite daunting for me as someone who, when I was first teaching in science, I was 21 years old and female. So there is like presumptions of you that the students make as well, of how good of a tutor you're going to be in terms of how you present. I think it's really important to understand that you're doing your job, and your job is to support these students, and they may have these presumptions, but you can be firm without being mean. If someone is being rude to you, or there is something where you feel like the situation is getting out of your control, then you can deal with that. In terms of like a mature age student, so that's kind of the situations I've had where they're older than me, and they feel like because I'm young, I don't know what I'm doing, and therefore they try and tell me how to do my job, but it's my job. So I think it's just reestablishing that of, oh no, actually, this is what we are doing. This is the practical, and this is how we're going to proceed. But thank you for your concern. This is why this is not necessary, or yes, we'll take this on board. I'm not sure what other concerns people may have about mature age students in terms of, is it issues with maybe not being so familiar with the online learning environment, or being a bit more removed from the education sector and then coming back compared to high school students? Is there specific concerns people have?
Was just somebody, I felt it was somebody who was maybe in the same space, was 21 when they first started. I guess it's less about concerned about whether their grip on technology or whether they were coming back, but more about meeting them. And I think your advice is perfect in that respect.
Thank you. I think it's hard sometimes to stand up for yourself and be like, no, I have been hired to do this job and I do know what I'm doing, because you can feel a lot of imposter syndrome. But I think it's about championing yourself and not letting the session, let them run away from the session with you. You're in charge, so that's hard to balance though. I acknowledge that.
So just to echo Lauren's wise words again, is there, no, I mean, as much as I'm talking about, educating, treating people as peers and so forth, there's the mutual respect. So not letting people talk over the top of each other too much, or, not giving each other enough space or listening to each other. Yes, you do need to steward the class forward in a way that everybody feels like they're being listened to and heard.
Thank you. I might jump in there, Peter, so we might need to move on, given our time coming up. We've got 4 minutes to kind of get through this summary. But
there was one question before you go on, Karen, about what it's like teaching in a hybrid situation. I was just going to suggest, whilst we don't have time to do that now, there would be information on the Italy website that anybody could go to if they do have concerns about hybrid teaching.
And
so when we talk about hybrid, we mean face-to-face with an online component as well.
And yes, and that's a really quite a whole interesting space to operate in. And there is quite a bit of support, which I can talk to you about. I'll talk you through in a minute. Okay, so just checking I'm sharing what I'm supposed to be sharing.
I believe so.
Okay, so so just to kind of summarize what Graham, Francis and Lauren have been talking about, and I'm not going to work you through this because I'm not quite sure we've got time, but we will share this PowerPoint and the Padlet with you. Some of my key takeaways are still around organization, and a good tutorial will, you will plan, you plan your tutorial, and you use the time management or manage your time as well as you can with run sheets and organizational structures like that. Things can go wrong, obviously, but you pick yourself up, and then you move on and reflect, as Graham says, on what you've done and how you can do better the next time, or do things not better, differently. The last thing I will share with you is there are myriad of resources available to support you. And I'm going to share, there's a link I'll share with you, and I'll just bring it up, but it looks like, doesn't look like that. It looks like, this. Stop sharing, and it looks like this. This is the problem of hybrid work. Okay. It looks very much like this, and it's a Padlet, basically, that takes you through a bunch of different things. So I will share this with you. It's got the technical support, learning tool support, we've got learning design support and professional development. Okay, and there's a questions at the end, what we might have missed. We will share this link with you in the PowerPoint, and it will probably lead you directly to Helen, in fact, who works with the e-learning advisors, and does a lot of professional development and support in that first and second column there. So reach out to all of us. We're here to help, and anybody can access this support. So hopefully we've helped you out today, and good luck as you go forward into the next few weeks. And I hope it goes absolutely well. Thanks very much for Graham, Francis, and Lauren, and Peter, and Helen for putting it together. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.
Good luck, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Enjoy yourselves.
Thanks for
Enjoy.
attending us. Thanks for presenting, guys. It was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen, for inviting us.
I know. Well, thank you for coming. It was great. It was a really nice, I think it was a really good mix across the, and we got, like people from each discipline, or different faculties, which gave us kind of a nice flavor, I think. Yes.
And some are course coordinators, some are tutors, some are like Lauren, like students who are now tutors. So that's really like a very diverse demographics of the participants.
Yeah.
No, my pleasure. Reach out anytime, Karen. I'll happy to assist.
Yeah, no, it was good. I think it was a nice mix.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Is anybody that's still in the meeting that has a question? Is that why you're still here? No, Shannon, yes. Natalia, yes. Theo?
Yeah. Just a quick question. Can I ask?
Yeah.
So where can I find that Padlet you mentioned just then?
Sure.
For the stuff that tutors need.
So I'm just going to post it in the chat for you.
Yes, please. Yeah.
And Theo, did you see the message that I put on the first Padlet about where to find the video, the recording?
Oh, yeah, I'll check that too. Yep.
Okay.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you.
So, I mean, even if you want whatever you need, if you go, like, if Google's a wonderful tool, you can usually find, that, and Italy, if you go Italy, UQ, not Italy, the country.
The country.
It'll often send you to the country. Different spelling, of course. So any of those links, and you can follow down on the right-hand column, there's usually a bunch of like buttons that you can press. You can organize an hour or 45 minutes with a learning designer, or an hour, sort of time with somebody from e-learning if you want to kind of work your way around using Blackboard or Turnitin or any of those particular tools, but particularly the active learning suite of tools around are really useful to engage in. And, like the Padlet, there's Padlet videos, aren't there, Helen, that take you through Padlet training videos?
There are also, yes, there are videos and there are guides on how to use Padlet. And there are also, we didn't mention it, H5P, polling and Chase, like active learning tools. They are also very widely used.
Yeah. So that should help you out. And just, I mean, you've got people's emails, just go directly to them.
I'm going to, just out of interest, Karen, what was that popular platform that was used for quizzes and so forth? I forget what it's called.
Kahoot.
Kahoot.
Yeah.
Is there actually a UQ account for that?
There isn't, unfortunately, but what I was saying that H5P, that's a platform for creating interactive learning objects, very easy to use, very intuitive. There's the one activity is called the Chase. It's almost identical replica of Kahoot. Francis, I can send you like an email on that.
That'd be great.
To use it. Yep. If anyone else wants, and we do run workshops, and we can do custom workshops as well. Anyway, yeah, and it's really easy tool to use.
Yeah, no, that'd be very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd find that helpful too, Helen, please.
Absolutely. Yeah. Lauren, do you use that? Do you use?
No, all of my teaching is in a
lab.
PC2 controlled environment, so they don't even let me take my phone in, let alone like H5P. I think it would have probably been really helpful when we were doing Zoom teaching, because science on Zoom teaching was not super conducive for that, particularly a lot of 3D stuff and process stuff that doesn't translate well to Zoom. But our primary goal is to teach them in person in a lab environment, and if we can do that, we will. But I mean, I do education PhD. It would be of interest to me to just kind of see what's available anyway. So
I'll definitely do that.
People still use people still use Kahoot too as well, don't they? It's a free version, but
it's a free version. I think for just 10 people, and everyone's like, if they want to use for more than 10, then it's a paid license, and UQ doesn't have a paid license, but we do have. It's very much similar. The Chase, the H5P, the Chase, it's very much similar.
Cool.
Yeah, last year to expand it out, I did just use groups. So if I had 30 people, I just had 3 groups of.
If you want to use the same Kahoot, you can duplicate it, and then if you have 3 tutorials running separately or 3 groups, then you'll have to sort of launch 3 of them separately. Or if you want all together, that's even easier.
Yeah. So lots of fun things out there. So thank you very much, everyone. And feel free to sort of put it on your APDs or whatever else.
Thank you, everyone. Happy to help out anytime.
Okay. Good to
see you soon, everyone.
Have a good semester. Bye. Bye.
Thank you.